All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to break down a major change in healthcare privacy, one that deals with some of the most sensitive patient information you can imagine. We're talking about records for substance use disorder treatment, and there's a new federal rule that is, well, it's a complete game changer. So let's kick things off with a fundamental question, really the core dilemma when it comes to treating substance use disorder, or SUD. And this isn't some abstract theoretical problem. It's a real-world, daily struggle for doctors and for patients who are just trying to do the right thing. Okay, so on one side of the coin, you've got this need for ironclad confidentiality, right? The fear of stigma, of discrimination, or even, legal trouble. That's a huge wall that can stop someone from getting help that could literally save their life. But then, on the other side, for a doctor to do their job safely and effectively, they absolutely need the full picture of a patient's health. So you see this constant tension, this real friction between two goals that are both incredibly important. So let's dig into that a little bit. Let's really understand the core problem that the old rules created, and just why striking that delicate balance was so difficult. Okay, the rule at the very center of this whole conversation is called 42 CFR Part 2. And its original purpose was, noble and incredibly important. It was all about shielding people from stigma and fear when they were seeking treatment for substance use disorder. It was designed to keep those records under lock and key, period. But here's the problem. It created this huge information silo. You had these super strict rules for SUD records, and then you had HIPAA, which you've probably heard of, the big federal law that governs pretty much all of our other health information. They were totally separate, operating in different universes. And that separation, it made it incredibly hard for doctors and other providers to actually coordinate a patient's care. So this was a problem for a long time. And eventually, it led federal regulators to come up with a new solution. The whole idea was to try and streamline these two systems to get better patient outcomes. But, and this is key, without throwing away that core privacy. And here's the solution they landed on. It's a new final rule that just went into effect in 2024. And the big idea is pretty straightforward. It's designed to align the key parts of Part 2 with that HIPAA framework that, frankly, the rest of the healthcare world is already used to. Now, I want to be clear. This didn't just happen overnight. This has been in the works for a while. The whole process really got kicked off back in 2020 with the CARES Act, and the end goal is really twofold. Make it less complicated for providers to comply, but at the same time, actually expand patient rights and make sure their care is better coordinated. All right, so that's the big picture. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. What is actually changing on the ground for patients and for the folks providing their care? This is where you can really see the biggest shifts. First, look at patient consent. Before, it was a mess of multiple, specific consents for everything. Now, a patient can give a single consent for all future treatment, payment, and operations. That is a huge deal for streamlining things. But there's always a but, right? Look at the penalties and breach notifications. They're now aligned with HIPAA's much steeper standards. And yeah, when we say steeper, we mean it. We're not talking about small fines anymore. By aligning with HIPAA, the penalties for just a single violation can now go over $2 million. So the stakes for getting this wrong, they are massively higher. But hey, it's not all just about bigger penalties. The new rule actually brings in a lot more patient-focused protections. For example, SUD counseling notes now get special protection, kind of like psychotherapy notes already do. Patients get new rights, like being able to ask for a list of who's seen their records. And this is a big one. There's now a clear, direct way for patients to file a complaint directly with HHS if they think their privacy has been violated. Okay, so with all this talk about making data sharing easier, you might be wondering, what about the original reason for all this secrecy? What about those core privacy protections? Well, that's a crucial point, so let's take a look at what is not changing. And this is probably the single most important thing for patients to hear. That original shield, the one that protects you from law enforcement using your records against you, it is still there, and it is still incredibly strong. Your SUD treatment records cannot, I repeat, cannot be used to investigate or prosecute you unless you give explicit written consent or there's a specific court order. And in fact, this is one area where the Part 2 rule is actually stronger than standard HIPAA protections. It's a really critical distinction, and it's there to make sure patients feel safe, to know that getting help won't be used against them in a court of law. Okay, so the rule is in effect. Why are we talking about this right now? Why is it so urgent? Well, let's take a look at the timeline.
So as you can see, this whole thing kicked off years ago, but the final rule was published and took effect in early 2024. But here's the key date to watch. There's a full compliance deadline. That means every covered healthcare organization has until February 16th, 2026 to get all of their policies, their notices, their procedures, everything completely in line with this new rule. The clock is definitely ticking.
And you better believe meeting that 2026 deadline is critical. Why? Because the same federal agency that enforces HIPAA, the Office for Civil Rights or OCR, is now the sheriff in town for Part 2 as well. And they're going to use the exact same playbook. Audits, investigations, and yes, the power to bring down those huge multi-million-dollar fines we were just talking about. So when you step back and look at it, this whole rule change is really a massive national experiment, isn't it? It's all about trying to find that perfect balance between privacy and better care. It's aiming for a system that's more integrated, more efficient, but it leaves us with this huge, critical question as we head towards that 2026 deadline. Will this new balance actually work? Will it improve care without breaking the trust of the very patients it was first designed to protect? I guess only time will tell.